Welcome to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. Use the power of discovering new habits to create success in all areas of life. Body, fitness and nutrition, being, spirituality, passion and purpose, balance, marriage, kids and relationships, business, marketing, sales, leadership and systems. Transform your life by learning how habits work. And now your host, a husband, father, entrepreneur, trainer, coach, and warrior, Jesse Ewell.
Welcome back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Ewell, and today I'm joined, and I'm super excited to have you on here, but Tim Grimes, who is the editor of the book, The Wealth Mindset. He is a writer of several best-selling stress management guides on Amazon. And I'm super excited to have you on the show today, man.
Thank you, Jesse, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, if you haven't heard of this book called The Wealth Mindset, it has been a super powerful book and super impactful for me. But you actually had the pleasure to edit this, right?
Correct. Yeah. This material is by Neville Goddard, who was a metaphysical. These days, we would probably label him like a New Age teacher from the middle of the 20th century. He taught from the 1930s until about 1972 when he died, and he conveys stuff that we would consider, New Agey, or I guess spiritual inner work, in a way that you and myself and I think many, many other people have just been blown away by, because it's so different than how we usually hear about these concepts. He approaches it in a very practical yet eloquent way. So I've published several of his works, of his talks, and of some of his best writings on Amazon over the last 5 years. And The Wealth Mindset is a collection of talks he gave in, I think, 1953.
Okay.
And it's a very short guide. I think it's just about 60 pages. And it's short for a reason. It's short because on every page there is some nuggets of wisdom that, quite frankly, you have to read more than once to understand a lot of the time. So it was a lot of fun to edit, and it's been a lot of fun to share the book with, at this point, thousands of readers over the last couple of years since it's been published.
Yeah, and I, reading it, like you read it once, twice, 3 times, and it seems like every time, I kind of consider it kind of like a gold mine. It's like the deeper you dive into it, the more gold you're actually getting out of it. So it's really been kind of a powerful book. And I think depending on where you're at in life, you could get something out of it today where, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now, you could get something completely different out of reading the exact same thing. How long have you studied Neville Goddard, and kind of what got you into this?
Yeah. So I found out about Neville, I think, in not that long ago, about 2013, or maybe even the beginning of 2014. And my background is in alternative mind-body, Zen, kind of far out mind-body stuff, which I did not do as a living. I'm not, a licensed therapist or anything like that. I'm just somebody who always was very interested in the mind-body relationship, interested in spirituality, what spirituality meant, how I could get better and feel better, how I could feel less stressed. And in my 20s, I lived at a Zen center for a year right after college, and I was kind of like constantly searching for like magical spiritual solutions. And I was always kind of, I went to film school. I was always kind of artsy. I never really fit in any job or anything like that. So I struggled a lot in my 20s, as I think a lot of people do, for those reasons. And in my late 20s, I kind of had an epiphany, which was that a lot of the quote unquote spiritual work I was doing was actually holding me back. It was like a cycle of kind of like the same old spiritual mumbo jumbo. And there was some good stuff there, but there was a lot more crap. I think you know who Byron Katie is, right, Jesse?
Yeah, I know who she is very well.
Yeah. I was exposed to her stuff, and it like blew my mind when I think I was like 27 or 28 years old. And that was like a major transition point for me. I had been doing real estate for a while. But like something just like clicked for me inwardly when I encountered Byron Katie and the work. And I became like a more motivated and practical person. And I know this is kind of a long answer, but I'm trying to give you the backlog of why I like Neville so much. So what happened was I kind of looked at myself in a different way after I encountered the work of Byron Katie. And in my early 30s, I was still doing real estate, and I was sick of it because I didn't find it fulfilling at all. And I started going to different like business seminars and stuff like that, just to try to figure out what I could do next in my life that was more conducive to how I felt inwardly. And that's how I stumbled upon Neville. It was through, 6 Degrees of Separation. I think I read Think and Grow Rich or something like that, which is the famous Napoleon Hill book. And then I think I found Wallace Wattles, who, The Science of Getting Rich. I don't know if you know that book or not. That's another like self-help classic, really good. And then Amazon recommended this guy Neville or something like that, and also bots or whatever. So I looked at one of his books, and like I started reading it, and I was no longer interested in spiritual, like really spiritual, what we think of as spiritual stuff, because I'd gone through that spiritual trip before, you know what I mean? And kind of come out the other side. And so he was using spiritual language, but then he was saying something practical about how your thinking directly creates your reality. And it just, excuse my French, but it blew me the fuck away. I was like, why has nobody ever told me about this guy before? Like this fucking guy he makes like Think and Grow Rich seem like a joke. Like he's so much more eloquent and precise and practical in his application of how to use your mind and your imagination to create better things happening for you than anybody else I had ever encountered. Right. So I was blown away, and I also was dumbfounded as to why I had never heard of this guy before. And one of the things I had started to do to make money and transition out of real estate was get into self-publishing. And I realized that there was a real lack of good material on Neville available online in book form and in ebook form. And it snowballed from there. I put out a lot of Neville stuff, edited a lot of Neville stuff, and got a lot of really, really, really positive feedback from that. And that's kind of led to what I do now, which is talk about these concepts with people on a practical level. And it's some of Neville's stuff, but also it's just all the stuff I've learned and how I think people can practically apply it in their lives.
Sure. Okay. So let's talk about, reading this book, The Wealth Mindset. Kind of the first 3 things you talk about is self-observation, definition of aim, and then detachment. For people listening to this, not necessarily for someone who's already read this, but what is self-observation? Like, what does that really mean? If you could explain that to our listeners.
Of course, yes. So self-observation means, how do you really feel? If we have the person that we present to the outside world and that other people might think that we are. But then there's our self-talk, our inner talk. And when you self-observation means you're observing how you are talking to yourself. So not how you're acting and trying to get people to react to you, but how you're reacting to yourself. So when we observe ourselves like this, most of us will realize that we're not like we treat ourselves like shit. Like negatively, we are full of negative self chatter and just bullshit most of the day, a lot of the time. So that's what that is.
Yeah, and so I kind of think of, maybe we wake up every day and it's like, what's the first story or first thing you're saying to yourself?
Mhm.
And a lot of times, like, I'll be honest, like, there's a lot of times where I wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't have enough of this, or you're worrying about money, or you're worrying about, something. And so self-observation is like, hey, you're observing the inner state of who you're being, not the external state. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times what you're saying is self-observation is really about, are you in alignment internally with how you are showing up externally? And really, because what we present to the external world is not usually the same thing that's going on in the internal world.
That's exactly. I completely agree with you. And there's a Buddhist saying, "Monkey mind," um, and it seems like that's what a lot of us have most of the time. We feel like it's like we're almost two different people. Like there's again this external person that's going through their life and seems to have their act together, but internally you might be full of self-criticism, self-doubt, just seemingly random negative thoughts about yourself and others, and judgment of others. And when that's not there, as you just said, but when you feel good, you'll notice that, or when you feel relaxed or in the moment doing whatever it might be, you'll notice that self-criticism is gone, and instead
Right.
you're actually living the life that you feel like you should be living.
Right. Yeah, you just kind of feel like you're in alignment. Everything's kind of flowing. I always tell people it's like it feels like a flow state. They're like, well, what is just be in the flow? It's like, well, when your inner reality matches your outer reality, that's when it feels like that.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And
and,
it,
and
it
then,
sounds very simple, but it's not
yeah,
easy to do.
yeah, it sounds simple, and it's said simple, but yeah, like you said, it's not easy. So, what is definition of aim? What does that mean?
So definition of aim basically means, what do you want? And
Okay.
again, not the external you, what you tell other people you want, but what do you really want deep down? Who do you really want to be? What do you really want to have? So definition of aim is, first of all, knowing what you really want, and then making it so that you don't lose focus of that. We get swayed one way and the other again all the time. And people lose focus of what's really important to them. For instance, you might say, oh, I want to be a loving, responsible individual, which seems like common sense, but then we find ourselves going about our lives losing, just totally losing our focus, and not actually being aware of that we've lost our focus of that.
Right.
And so again, through self-observation, we realize that we do not always hold true to our aim. So you want to know what you want.
Sure. So let's dive into this. So definition of aim would be, maybe a target that's often a distance that says, hey, this is what I want. This is who I want to be. And we're talking about, I think one of the things that people often associate this with is, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to, change my hair. I want to change all these external things about me. But definition of aim is like, hey, who do you actually want to be, as, maybe a husband, father, wife, whatever, wherever you fit in there. But it's like, it's about who you want to be, not about what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, this can be interpreted as I do want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to make, X amount of dollars more next year. And it can be interpreted superficially that way, but that's not what this is really about. This is deep down, we can say your spiritual core, or fundamentally, who do you want to be? And, it's like the answer doesn't have to be amazingly profound. I mean, the answer might be, for instance, like for me, it's very important to have a sense of peace about me and to be a peaceful person and, like a loving husband and father. That's very important to me. And that's something that, my aim is there every moment for that, or hopefully is, you know what I'm saying? Where it's something that I do not want to lose focus of. So it's not like my definition of aim is like, well, I want to be a loving husband, so I'm going to do this. That can be part of your day-to-day life, but definition of aim is meant to be deep down who you are, and touching that, being able to actually feel that in your life every day as you go about your day.
Okay. Yeah, and it sounds kind of like the steering wheel.
Yes.
Of like, hey, this is this is the place I'm aiming for and want to go in, the direction. And that's kind of your steering wheel, is having that defined.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor.
So, okay. And then there's this other thing called, which we'll kind of come back to, this definition of aim and goals and things like that. But what is this detachment that you talk about in the book?
Yeah. So what we see through self-observation is what we have just discussed, where we notice a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of negative inner behavior and inner judgment about ourselves and others, that if we're not aware of it, if we're too busy focusing on external things, we might just gloss that over. But if we focus through self-observation, and see that those thoughts and that negative, cycle of inner behavior is there, we then are able, through different techniques, different meditation techniques, which we'll go over, to detach ourselves from judging ourselves from having those thoughts. In other words, we can beat ourselves up for having those thoughts, but beating ourselves up is only going to get us to a certain point. And we want to transcend where we currently are. We want to actually change. And if we just beat ourselves up for having these thoughts, it's hard to transcend what we are. So by detachment, we're able to look at ourselves in a new way and transform ourselves via feeling about ourselves in a new way, which is something that, again, we'll discuss in more detail, I'm sure, as we go along.
Yeah, so I kind of think of detachment as maybe, a thought that I can take away from me, or from my, where my inner state, and look at it, and be detached from it, not have it kind of consume me or become who I am.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can have a single thought like, oh shoot, I should have thanked that person, that was so rude of me.
Right.
And we can have that thought, and then it can just snowball out of control. It's like, oh my God, why didn't I thank that person? That, I'm such an asshole. I always think this, I always do stuff like that. And before you know it, you're just going off the rails. While if you have detachment, you can notice, oh, you know what? I didn't thank that person as I should have. And just notice that for what it is. And then go about your day and go to the next thing and still have that aim of being who you want to be. And if you're able to do that, it means next time you'll probably thank the person, because you're able to detach yourself from your overly emotional, overly inner chatter, negative, hot box that you have inside yourself.
Sure.
You see, that's not the real you. That's the small you, and you're touching the bigger you when you detach yourself from that.
So, looking at this, these are kind of the three pillars in the book, correct?
Yes, I mean that's Neville's philosophy in a nutshell, I would say. And there's so much in each of those concepts. It's very difficult to explain his philosophy, like in terms of just three pillars, but it's a good starting point for sure.
You just say maybe for the book, if you're listening to this, it's like, hey, here's the three pillars the book kind of starts out in. If you read any of his other work, you can dive into this for forever and probably like continue just to like never find like an end to it.
Yes.
The way that I found out about Neville Goddard was actually I studied a lot of Joe Dispenza's work.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting on a message board one time and someone said, hey, a lot of the work he's doing is actually Neville Goddard's work, and very similar. And so I started kind of going down that path, and getting into this world of metaphysics. But what is the real purpose of metaphysics?
I mean, that's a big question, right? But on a practical level, it's transforming who you are from within, and then seeing external results naturally happen because you've transformed who you are from within.
Okay. So one of the things that maybe if you're a listener is like, well, what does that mean? That means, changing from the inside out instead of the outside in. Would that, or transforming?
Exactly. It's changing from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. Now, when we've most listeners have probably heard of something like that.
Right.
What's so interesting about deep metaphysics, if you want to call it that, which Neville is that he means that literally. We're talking about literally being able to change your thoughts and your feelings to such a degree that you can do seemingly very little external work or change externally, and still naturally over sometimes a relatively short period of time see just crazy things happen in your life. It's not magic. It's just when you work with yourself, if you can actually change how you feel and face the world in a more positive light, and deal with that inner negative self-talk in a new way where it's much more detached and you're much more able and capable to feel positive on a more consistent basis. In other words, if you just focus on feeling good more often, if you can succeed in feeling good more often, I basically guarantee you that you will have a lot of positive external change occur for you as well over a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, and I've done naturally a lot of things where, I would take even a year and a half ago, we moved to California. I had me and my wife, we had two personal training facilities for 12 years. And at the end of 2017, I made a goal of, hey, I want to sell my gyms and move to California. And at the time, our gyms were in a great position. But it was kind of like I could see what it would be like to not only live in California, live by the beach, the weather, kind of feeling into all of this. But what was really crazy is I didn't really do anything from a standpoint of, I got to do this, I got to do that, for about 2 months, 2.5 months. And then it was kind of like as things just started to kind of flow and naturally happen. Um, I would say like I didn't do a ton of stuff externally to make it happen. It was like I could just envision what it would feel like. I got the feeling, I got the emotion, and then I got my wife in it too because we're like, hey, this is what we want to do. And so the reason I want to explain this is because a lot of times people set goals and set outcomes, and it's like, well, I want to lose the 20 pounds, but they don't actually feel what it would be like to lose the 20 pounds first. And that's where I think people really mistake is like they want something to change, whether it's externally or whatever, but they don't actually go to, well, what would that feel like? Or what would the emotions be when I made that change? And then they can focus on that versus focusing on losing the 20 pounds, every time they put food in their mouth. Cause generally it's like, well, I'm fat, I'm out of shape, and that's what they focus on versus focusing on, well, what is it going to feel like when you lose 20 pounds?
Well put. That's exactly right. I mean, when you think about losing 20 pounds, does it feel good? Does it excite you? Does it get your imagination thinking about, oh, I feel so much better now when I'm outside moving around? Does it stoke you? Does it just charge you up? Or does it seem like a drag? How the heck am I going to do this? And every time you're eating, you have that negative monkey mind self-talk that we were talking about. Which one is it? For most people, it's probably the latter. They're not imagining and thinking good stuff. They're thinking about the negatives and how hard it is to do it, as opposed to how joyful it would be to have that, to be 20 pounds lighter or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let me ask you this, like, what is maybe one thing that you've used this on to create in your life?
Mm-hmm.
It would be like, man, I'm doing exactly what I felt, into.
Yeah.
Probably had a lot, but like, what is one that really sticks out to you?
One that sticks out to me because it happened relatively quickly after I found Neville's stuff was, like I said, I really wanted to transition out of real estate. And I had been, I'd say struggling is a strong word, but I had been having difficulties doing it for a number of years. I've been trying to do it for like, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 years, but I've been, it seemed like it wasn't actually happening. And I was working a little bit less, but I still was in it. And when I used to work a lot in the summers, and that would just drive me, like I would just, it would burn me out is what it comes down to. And so shortly after I encountered Neville's stuff, I started I made the beginner's mistakes, I guess you would say, with Neville's stuff, like imagining having more money. So I didn't have to work in real estate. Right. And, you can see that immediately it's what we were just talking about losing 20 pounds. I was thinking about what I did not want, which was working in real estate, as opposed to using the money in a way that I would actually enjoy. So those were some initial mistakes I made. But at the same time, and when I figured out that I was doing that, I was able to focus more on what it felt like to have more free time and more time to myself, and being able to relax and enjoy what I was doing was relatively easy, and became easier to evoke feelings of, what, I have a lot of free time. I'm now doing more of what I like to do. I feel fulfilled doing what I'm doing. And I'm trying to think of the timeline here exactly. 2014. Yeah, I think that within like 4 or 5 months of encountering Neville's stuff, I never worked in real estate again, except to sell a property I owned, and then to buy a property that my wife and I currently live in. But I stopped. I mainly rented apartments to people, and I'd never rented apartments again. I think within 4 or 5 months of encountering Neville's stuff, never had to go through that BS again after trying to get out of it for, like I said, 5 or 6 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing, what you can do with that power. Um, and just to kind of back up what you said, like one of the things that I see as a coach is a lot of people know what they don't want. And they're very clear about that, but they actually don't know. Like you said, it's like, I want more money, or I don't want to have to do real estate, because that's knowing what I don't want. But they never talk about the opposite. Well, what would it feel like to have more free time? Because ultimately that's what you really wanted.
Exactly.
And so there's this concept that we talk about. It's like, hey, here's what I don't want. But then you're not really clear on what is the feeling, because the feeling of what you do want and you envision and what you want is actually what you're saying is, I don't want to do real estate. But it's like, no, what would it feel like to have more free time and do what I actually like doing? And those are things that the feeling actually comes out, because the other feeling is, oh man, I got to go to real estate again and do this. And you're
Right.
regretting it. And so you're just getting more of that. And it's kind of like you're stuck in a loop.
Yeah. I like a phrase I like is, it's like lackful, like a feeling of lack, that's kind of a common phrase I feel like in metaphysics, a great phrase. It's like we live in a lackful culture, and we're trained to think in terms of lack, what we do not have, what we do not want, as opposed to an abundance mindset, a wealth mindset, which is what I do have already, first of all, which is very important, and also what I'm going to get more of.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's switching it from a feeling of lack to a feeling of abundance. Neville's probably his most famous book is the short book. It's called Feeling is the Secret. And Feeling is the Secret is a pretty good summation. You want to talk about principles, like that's a very simple, pillar of all of this is feeling is the secret. I tell people when I work with people, feel good, not bad. Just focus on how you feel on the inside and feeling good more often. And outer results usually will follow.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and this is it's super simple stuff to talk about, and to be like, oh man, like just feel the abundance, or feel what you do want. But like if you're stuck in a feeling of lack all the time, because that is what your external reality is giving you feedback of, people have a really hard time shifting that. And so what is maybe a way somebody, could do that, or that you've seen that someone could do that?
Yeah. So this is a great question, and there's no one answer here. Okay. So it's not like whatever I say is just my opinion. Because there's so many ways to make a shift so you can feel better internally. However, even though there's many ways, it's finding what works for you. I'll go over a few of my favorites if you want to right now.
Yeah, you can do one or two, just simple things.
I would say this, if you can learn how to feel more relaxed more often, if you can do more things that truly relax you, then you will make that shift faster.
Okay.
I wrote a guide talking about Neville's material called Relax More, Try Less. And the gist of that guide basically is that if you focus on feeling more relaxed and feeling good more often by just feeling relaxed, other good things will happen to you. And how do you feel more relaxed more often? That I can't tell you, because people feel relaxed in so many different ways, but you have to figure out a way to feel more relaxed more often. And often it's obvious. There's obvious ways of doing that. It's just actually doing it.
So, what are some ways that I'll go through some ways that maybe I've done that, but what are a couple ways you've done that?
Sure. So listen, so for instance, I could give you, stereotypical answers like, breathing and meditation exercises, walking, swimming, working out. But some of the hacks that I think that have worked best for me. The best hack I know of to feel better quickly and to be able to relax your body and your mind is to be totally physically active and playful for a few minutes. If you do that, you like your thinking cannot catch up to your body when you get very active and playful. I was into this concept before I got into Neville. This is, I have if you want to watch me doing this stuff, you can go to stopbeingserious.com. I've got, many videos of me acting crazy and explaining how physical movement can make you quickly feel more relaxed. Another great hack is talking out loud to yourself. In other words, speaking out loud to yourself so that you become aware that the inner voice that we were talking about that is self-critical is actually bullshit. If I speak out loud to myself and I'm like, you know what, Tim, you're sure acting like an asshole right now. What the hell's wrong with you? This is absolute bullshit. And if I speak out loud to myself like this for 4 or 5 minutes, there's going to be a shift. And all of a sudden I'm going to calm down internally.
Right.
And that's another phenomenal hack. And then another hack that I like is simply, it's a form of meditation, but it's basically where you get very, very relaxed. And then you just watch your thoughts and you don't judge your thoughts at all. And that's something that we were talking about in terms of detachment. And one of the tools that Neville talks about a lot. Those are all hacks that I like. But you just got to do what relaxes you, Jesse. I think that, you can give some examples right now too, but everybody's different what relaxes them.
Sure.
So
yeah, and I think the easy stuff is, meditate, pray, but sometimes we're still doing that from that place of lack.
Yes, right.
Not necessarily shifting us. And so the thing I like about physically moving is like movement gets you out of your head and into your body. Because it has to become aware of your body. And so you stop thinking about stuff and calculating stuff, and you just start, kind of like moving through life, which is, super important. And a lot of times, like, I think we become unconscious that our body actually knows the answer, that our mind doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I assume that your body always knows the answer and that your mind never does. That's a pretty good philosophy to have.
Yeah. But you can't get the answer if you're always in your head.
Right. So you got to figure out a way to get out of your head. And what we're talking about, physically getting active, is again it's the best way I've found to quickly get out of your head, because your mind has no choice but to shift. Your thinking has no choice but to shift if you get very physical, as I know you're aware of, because you've done a lot of, stuff that involves incredible physicality. And that shift is all you need to change things. And you can make that, a habitual thing. You can make sure that you get to that place every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So there's one thing there's one thing I want to quote from the book, and we can talk about this, but it was, you must stop spending your thoughts, your time, and your money. Everything in life must be an investment. That single statement in the book was probably one of the most powerful statements that I read throughout the whole thing. I mean, there's a million gold nuggets, but that thing was like, oh my gosh, like, this is kind of the secret sauce to me behind the book. But like, can you like dive into this a little bit more?
Yeah. If you want to get deep, which we're trying to get here, and quite frankly, you're not reading Neville if you're not trying to get deep within yourself and do some work on yourself. You realize through self-observation, through noticing how negative and lackful a lot of our thinking often is, you learn how wasteful we are. See, we like to think of ourselves as being like a good person, a solid person, a helpful person. But by observing how we actually think and how prone we can be to negativity, you realize we're actually wasting. Neville would say we're spending. Okay. So we're, instead of, by buying into our negative self-talk, we waste away our lives. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. Unfortunately, the truth is that we get just stuck in this cycle of crap when we buy into the negative feelings and thoughts we have. While if we are able to detach ourselves somewhat and step back and work with this negativity that we might feel in a new way and transform it and transcend it by focusing on what we really want, by focusing on the abundance in our life and what we can also have, and like I said, already do have, that's investing. And if you view your life every day from the paradigm of am I spending right now? Am I wasting? Or am I investing? Am I becoming a positive, better person on a practical level? Or am I just kind of, kicking the wheels? If you ask yourself that question as you go through your day, it can be very beneficial. It sounds like it's been beneficial to you, and I know it's been beneficial to others. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do one thing. Like, I'm gonna give everybody kind of an altar call right now on this. Like, think about in your life right now. Whether it's when you wake up, whether it's on your way to work, whether it's, when you get home at night, you're at your office in this moment, and am I spending or am I investing? And that's really like the question you ask yourself. Because what it does is it kind of pulls us out of, well, shit, I'm worrying about, my spouse, or I'm feeling lack about, my bank account, or maybe I'm thinking about the cookie that I'm not supposed to eat at the office. And so these are thoughts of spending, or the thoughts of investing is, man, like, I love, being with my kids. I'm down playing with them when I got home, or this morning I made sure I kissed my wife or gave her a hug, or, I went out and, was looking at ways that I can, communicate with my clients and really give them value. And so those are all different ways that we can either spend our time or invest our time. The choice is up to us. And every moment or every second is that choice. And, where I really believe where we, may not be where we want to be in a certain area, like it could be your body, it could be your fitness, it could be your marriage, it could be your business, is chances are that we've spent or been spending more time in lack versus, hey, if you look at a place in your life where you're exactly kind of, or you're at least on the path of where you want to be, chances are you've been investing in the right places on that side. And, that was a really distinct thing for me in the book, was like, okay, well, how deep can you really take this? You could take this anywhere, and use it kind of as a mirror.
Yeah, you really can use it as a mirror. I would add a helpful tool for me with this has been that I like to ask myself throughout the day, how do I feel right now? Again, do I feel good or do I feel bad? And like, maybe you like, I like to use with people like a simple number rating system, like 5 being really stressed and one being really feeling really good. And, you can be 2, 3, or 4 as well. But just, like, how do I feel right now? Am I a 1? Am I a 3? Am I a 5? And if you just become aware of how you feel, you become aware of whether you're spending or investing. Because when you feel good, which is probably like at a 1 or a 2, like you just you're in the flow, as you said. And it seems like natural, like the way life should be. You don't second guess yourself. While when you're at like a 4 or a 5, the stress is there, and it's just your sense of lack is obvious. You know what I mean? You're buying into that self-talk. And I think a lot of the work is just being able to check in with yourself and noticing that.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily, like, a mistake people I think make is they come down too hard on themselves. Like, if you just, I know you're big into habits. Like, I think again, a helpful habit is like, at least 3 times a day, when you get up in the middle of the day and before you go to bed, check in with yourself. Where are you on your scale? Are you spending or investing? Like, am I, so I ask myself, am I at a 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5? And if I am at a 4 or 5, I don't beat myself up over it. I'm just become aware of it. I just, again, going back to these pillars that Neville talked about, I observe it. And just that observation and that awareness makes it so that it becomes easier to get down to that 2 and 1 level where I'm feeling good, and where I'm feeling a sense of natural wealth and abundance.
Yeah. And I think once you observe it, you can talk about like that other pillar, which was like, hey, we can detach from it once we're aware of it.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's a huge distinction on this also, is like, hey, by us becoming aware, we can, begin to attach from it. But a lot of times I think we get to this place of, oh no, I can't think this way. And it's like we're trying to run from it all day long, or
Yes.
chasing us, versus no, let's become aware, let's accept it, but let's detach from it and know that that's not who we have to be right now in this moment.
Yeah, that's enough. Just being able to do that is so powerful.
Yeah.
You are not that person. You're not that thought,
This is kind of what you're doing, but it's not who you are at your core.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's
amazing. And it's also, it becomes funny too, because you realize how like volatile and how fleeting a lot of these feelings are. Like, we can feel like shit at like 9 a.m. and an hour later and be like, I was saying, like a 5 on the scale, really stressed out. And an hour later, you might be down to a 2 or a 1. And it's like, if you become more aware of that, you take your stressful feelings a lot less seriously, is what it comes down to. Like, you're able to detach from them.
Like, I struggle with this for a long time. And the reason why I fell back to habits and kind of like came out with this habit-based lifestyle, because I realized no matter how I woke up, if I did these habits, they were investing into me, and they would get me to change my state. And so that's why, like, I'm so passionate about habits, because I know this, that, hey, even if I get up and maybe my mind's like, oh shit, my wife's, she doesn't love me, or she doesn't want me, or whatever, like the things that we think when we get up, or maybe I feel a lack of my bank account, whatever it is. If I invest in my habits, invest in myself, in these things in the morning, within an hour, within 30 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm already changing that inner state.
Right.
And that's really like why I created this, because I knew that, hey, even if you wake up this way, like, it doesn't mean that your whole day has to go like that.
It doesn't mean that your next hour has to go like this. You know what I mean? And that's what's amazing. And that's so powerful, because so many people don't recognize that's a possibility. Yeah.
So, well, hey man, I appreciate you being on here. Do you have any last words for anybody?
No, I would just say, again, to be a broken record, I really recommend doing your best to feel good more often. Allow yourself the gift of feeling good more often. Figure out a way to feel good, because you deserve that. And if you feel good internally more often, that's not you being like a lazy or a slothful person. It's the opposite of that. Inner work is a real thing, and it will lead to outer results but the outer results are really just a bonus a lot of the time because you feel better inside. And that's what life's all about is feeling fulfilled internally. And then other good things just happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. So how do any of my listeners get in contact with you if they want to know more about what you're doing and maybe even possibly work with you?
Sure. So my website is radicalcounselor.com. That's radical, like radical dude. Counselor, like counselor. Radicalcounselor.com. All of my information is there. If you search on Amazon for Tim Grimes, you'll see a bunch of my books and guides, as well as, books by Neville that I've edited and, stuff that might interest you. But yeah, I'm always, people who are interested in this material are people who I love to talk to. If you have a genuine question, I do my best to respond in a thoughtful way to, answer your question as best I can. So radicalcounselor.com. And it's been a pleasure spending time with you guys today.
Yeah. So if you guys are listening to this, I want to make sure I will have a link to Tim's website in the show notes, and then also any links to his books on Amazon. So you'll be able to see those. So thank you once again, man, for being on here.
Thank you, Jesse. Have a good one.
Guys, if you guys are looking to connect further with a group of like-minded people, join myself and so many others in the Habit-Based Lifestyle Secrets group on Facebook, where I will be dropping daily habits to help you live to your potential. If you want to be one of our next case studies and begin living this habit-based lifestyle, feel free to reach out to me, Jesse@habitbasedlifestyle.com. Until next episode, have a great day.